Now, for you, when you finish your reading and whatever homework, it would be good if you post them onto the Homiletics group so that Sister Karen can record and keep track of it, okay? And so that you will get your grades too. Of course, when I finish marking, I'll hand it over to her too. In fact, most of the first time your homework I had already done, but I don't know how to send to you. Most probably I'll take some pictures and then send to you to your own email. Okay, here you have Charles Spurgeon. He said that prayer will singularly assist you in the delivery of your sermon. In fact, nothing can so gloriously fit you to preach as descending fresh from the mount of communion with God to speak with men. And so we do encourage you to learn how to pray and pray always. I'm not just talking about the form of prayer. So often you find preachers, say, okay, let's pray first before we start the service and all that. And that's good, but you need to have a personal communication with the Lord. And especially when you have to preach and you have to teach. So in this season, I'm preaching more often and having to prepare more sermons. And therefore, I need to really talk to him often. All right, last session, we talk about, from text to sermon, we talk about choice of passage. And then we talk about the thought units. We talk about different biblical thoughts, and we talk about sermon length, building blocks of thought, and paragraph division. So I hope that you can run through your notes, and if not, then just look through the video again, and you will see all of this, refresh your memory. And then we spend quite a bit of time talking about exegesis, because this is the very basis of your preaching. If your exegesis is wrong, then you find that everything is wrong. So some people actually, because of the wrong exegesis, they will come up and almost like becoming a cult. For example, one preacher, he said that this Cain and Abel, and he said that Cain was the son produced by Eve and the devil. Eve went in and slept with the devil and produced that. So then from then on, you find that in every of his sermon, he continued to believe that, and so he preached that. So even nowadays, this man has died long time ago, but his followers continue to preach this. And then we also talk about the exegetical fallacies. We talk about the subjective fallacy, incidental, and all these. I want you to go back and watch the video again, because this one, I assure you, in your ministry, you would commit some of this. It happened with me, and so I was able to check. A lot of time I was able to check myself, because knowing this as a background. So it's important not to check others, but really to check yourself, so that you do not, make a lot of mistake and this error. Okay, then we also talk about dealing with online information. You have actually an information overload, and therefore you must learn how to process, learn how to compare and evaluate. Don't just take the information when somebody sent to you. So what I normally do is I normally check, but from time to time I still miss, and then I'll have my friends writing to me and said, this is not true. Can you take it off and all that? Yeah. So good friends are there to tell you this is not true. Yeah. So the good guideline is never use any information until you have checked it out. And then we also shared with you about the online Bible study tools. I hope that you do have time to go and check it out. in the midst of all your reading and in the midst of your studying and also watching some Korean movie, you know, you have time to go and check out these Bible study tools, because right now, praise God, is that all these are at your fingertips and you can use them. Okay, then we also learn about how to survey the text, right? Survey and gather notes. We also learn about examining the context of the passage and also read the whole chapter to discover the writer's intention. This exercise is absolutely important because you cannot depend upon other people's notes. Even now when you go online, you will find that people give you different notes and different ideas. And like I say, some of those information may not be accurate. And therefore, you have to go and look for the primary source. Most of them would repeat what other people say. Okay? And then we relate the text to a broader literary unit. And then we also check out, in order to find out deeper meaning and the different shade of meaning, we also got to check out the different English translation. Like at one time, Pastor Phoebe asked me, you know, there's a particular word, and so I went into the Greek and then took out the Greek meaning, even though other translation would give the variation of the meaning. So then we talk about these good friends of ours, the why, the how, the when, and the where, and the what. All right, and what we have to do is to get ourselves a good resource book, if possible, introduction to Old Testament, introduction to New Testament, and the commentaries, and all of that, so that you can understand the content and context. Yeah. All right. We also talk about 1 Corinthians 13, whereby we talk about the context, where you find that you really have to read chapter 12 before you can understand chapter 13, because it's sandwiched in between two gifts, right? So chapter 12 and chapter 14 talking about the gift, like 14 talk about tongues and prophecy, and chapter 12 talk about the various gifts. And then right smack in the center is a big the chapter on love. Then you want to find out why this emphasis on love. This morning when I preach and I shared, revival is a revival of love, meaning that you have great love for God. So don't think that revival is just emotional. Revival has to have this great desire to know God. And then that love is translated into real love, whereby we love our neighbors as ourselves. So I always look for people who tell me that they have gone through revival. I always check how they respond with their love. And so I have a question to ask them. I say, do you love me a lot? After you say you have been revived, do you love me a lot? If you still don't like me, then you have not been revived. All right. And when you preach through a series, you read through the entire book actually and make your own working outline of the book, and then you keep the larger literary context in view. So if it's a narrative, then you keep that in view. But then you are going to preach through the whole book, then what you have to do is really understand it. And also, this is what I must add, is that you will have to look for the different books during the same period. All right, like different, okay, let's say for example, you want to preach from the gospel. Then you cannot just preach from the gospel of Mark alone. You really have to go to Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Okay, and then especially you want to go to John because John is unique by itself. And then you want to see what Gospel of John says about this. Okay, and always look for the writer's idea, the original idea, go back to that time. And therefore, you really have to understand the history, the culture. You go back and you try to understand where the writer is coming from. A lot of time I make the mistake is that I use my own understanding, the Singaporean cultural background, and then the little English that I knew, and the little Greek that I knew, and so on, and I try to impose my idea upon what the writer's idea would be. And so that create a lot of problems. So you find that when we did this exercise in Bible school, the lecturer, they were very strict about this. They say you can't just read into it. And then sometimes we are very stubborn, and then we always say, why not? Why not? He may be saying this or he may be saying that. And the lecturer will say, no, because during that time they don't have this or they don't have that. And how can you say that they are saying this? So we mustn't be stubborn, and claim that, oh, the Holy Spirit told me. Now, if you keep saying the Holy Spirit tell me, then everything can just go haywire. All right. So what the writer's assertion about the subject is very important. Context and content. All right. The context of the content. Then we talk about the handicap of getting a subject, a verse that does not fit the whole picture, cannot figure out how the portion is related to what precedes and what follows. Sometimes you do not understand because of the fact that when you are doing this, when you want to write a sermon with only one theme, then you are trying to find that one theme, and so that one theme may elude you, and so you cannot force your idea into it. You have to let the word speak to you and not you speak to the word. And after placing the passage within its context, then we have to examine the detail of the text within the genre. And if they do not fit, then drop. Okay? Don't force into it. Okay. Then as you study the passage, relate the parts of to each other to determine the exegetical idea and its development. So this is one of the tasks that is depending upon your integrity. And I have seen quite a number of preachers who twist here and there, then throw in another verse and twist the meaning of it. Maybe the same word, and then they'll bring this and they will speak very profoundly about the Hebrew meaning and all that. And sometimes it's very sad because then you find that the part just cannot fit and the whole engine is not working. And we say the means is not the end. So when you start to do all your grammatical analysis and all the etymology, be very careful. Don't just take all the nuances, all the different meaning of that one word and dump into that one verse. It may not be. And therefore, you have to be absolutely honest and you have to say, oh, it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But sometimes you want to prove a point and therefore we force our idea into it. Okay. The exegetical process, we basically, when you start to exegete, you do a synthesis, all right, which means that you first have a thesis, have an idea, okay, then you have an antithesis, which means that you have a counter idea. So this one, it presents an idea, you have a counter idea, then you come up with a coherent idea, is a synthesis, all right? And so when you start to exegete, you start to look for all these different conflicting ideas and then come together, and then you have a whole picture. And then from that whole picture, you start to analyze again, you start to break it down. To analyze means you break it down into chunks, and then from there, you put it back again. So it's like this hourglass kind of an image. Means from the big picture that you get, then you analyze it, you break down into small parts, and then you come up. This process of thinking is very important because you exegete it, so you toss it back and forth. And this one is very hard to just explain it's best that we can practice it. It's best that we can show you how this is being done. Okay, and so synthesis is the process of building information up. Then analysis is the process of breaking information down. Okay, any question, anyone? I can't hear you anyway, so you will have to tell Sister Karen. If there's any question, you can wave, and then Sister Karen will wave at me. And I can see all of you too. Okay, so now this is what you see, right? It's almost like inductive and deductive, isn't it true? Okay, so when you are going to analyze something, you take one part and then you break it down into smaller parts. And then so then for the synthesis is that this part comes in and then you take it down into the smaller part to analyze. All right. Okay, so this is what happened here. It's like, because when this is the very gun that I used in the Singapore military when I was. This is a very old gun. It's called AR-15 or M16, and so the synthesis will be that you receive a whole gun like that. All right, but we have been trained how to take this gun apart, and so we start to analyze every part. For example, this type of gun during battle they used to get jammed, and so in order for us to get it to function again, we will break it down and clean it, clean all the parts, and then put them back again. And so when I look at this gun, I feel very young again. I feel like 18 again. Right? Yeah. And then you go back into the synthesis. All right, means that the whole gun in itself, and then you break it into parts, and then you. So same with your exegesis, is that you see the whole text, and then you break it into parts, and then you put it back again. But when you put it back again, this time it will be different, because this time you start to understand the parts. But now when I give you this gun like that, you will not know how to what's inside. But when I begin to show you and say, look at all these parts, and what would be this, this is how the gun would fire the bullet, and so on and so forth. So you now begin to understand this, and then you go back to synthesis. This process is so important, because how do you remember a sermon, right, for 45 minutes to 1 hour without notes? How do you remember? That's because you have taken this thing apart, and then you know, because you practice and you drill. So some of us here, when you begin, I would expect you to use notes. All right, expect you to use notes. But when you use notes, the danger is that you start to read. Instead of talking to the people, you are just reading the text, You're like, no, news readers, they are trained. They know how to read in an exciting manner. But when you read, I think most of us might fall asleep, yeah? So it's very important. Now, getting the synthesis is, first you have to have your thesis. Remember, we say your thesis, your cultural ideas about the passage. And then your antithesis, the writer's idea that contradict your idea. And then the synthesis, you adapt and adjust the principles of the passage within your cultural understanding. So every time when we read the Bible, whether you are just a reader of the Bible, a student of the Bible, or you are a preacher, you go through this again and again. And how your ability to synthesize will help you to determine whether your sermon is accurate or not, and whether it's culturally relevant to your people. At one time in America, I was preaching about Elijah. Then one sister came to me and said, "Pastor, what have Elijah to do with us?" I was so shocked. I was like, oh, because that sermon did very well back home. Singapore people responded well to that. But when in America, they did not understand. And so that set me thinking that it's not because they are no good, but because I have not been able to understand things from their point of view. Yeah? And then how do we do the synthesis is that we read the passage, right? We read the passage and we determine the context, and then we start to understand the writer's meaning. Like you have been reading your textbook, and initially when you first got started, like all of you have been saying that it was a little bit tough because you are learning a new thing. But subsequently, when you begin to understand the language of the author and how he expressed himself, and then you begin to understand the logical points, then what happened here, it becomes easier. So reading the Bible is the same thing, is that when you read a passage or you read from a different genre, let's say now you are going to read Psalms, and Psalms, they are songs, and you don't understand why this verse and that verse, and how come they seems to like misplace, they are not related. But when you start to sing it in Hebrew, then you start to realize that different parts have been placed there because of the sound, because of the same sounding words, or because they have a process where they use the alphabet like Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav. All these are like A, B, C, D. And so when you start to understand from the Jewish standpoint, then you say, so this song is sound based on A, B, C, D, right? But of course, to the Malaysian audience, they don't understand. We say, okay, Aleph, yes. Yeah. Oh, can't hear. Oh, okay. Let me see. Can you hear? Okay. 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 All right. Good. Thank you. Maybe I can hear it. So you find that whenever you are, can you hear? Can you hear? Okay. Good. Okay. So sometimes the Jewish cultural passages, right? You understand where they come from. That's called exegesis. And then when you start to relate with your people, it's called hermeneutics. And so you have to learn how to do that. So being a preacher, some people say, oh, very easy, I just preach. It's not that easy. And when people take preaching too lightly, you find that there is no depth, or there's a lot of misinterpretation, the essence all wrong, and they can go on for years. People preaching the same mistake for years, and somehow the Holy Spirit used that to bless, like I told you about this allegorical approach, and the Holy Spirit can use that to bless. The palm tree means something, the fruit means something, the root means something, the leaf means something. And some people hear and say, whoa, praise God, such deep sermon, So this is, but we have to know where we are coming from, yeah? And then to analyze is to test your initial impression, examine the detail with the context. So now you are taking up into parts, right? And then in every part here, now your initial impression about this part of the whole, and you test it, you examine it. Am I accurate about it? And if I'm not, then you will have to go back and check what the writers really mean. So that when Jesus said that, it is if your eye sin against you, what did he say? Pluck out your eye. Now, if we were to do that exactly, most of us will be blind. Say, pluck out your eye. And one of the preachers actually said that would be the case. He said that Jesus actually preached within the law. And Jesus would insist that if your eye sin against you, you pluck out your eye. And when I listened to that preacher, and I said, oh dear, which Bible school did he come from? You see, and then I realized that he didn't come from any Bible school. I checked his background, and he is so proud. He said, I have no need for Bible school. So I'm surprised he didn't go around with one eye or no eyes. But you must understand what is the real meaning, what is the idea, before we start to tell people to pluck out their eye and cut off their ear and cut off their hands and all that. All right? and then check what other researchers are saying. There are people that God used to tell you, to bring things up and make them clearer for you. And therefore, this pride thing, this initial pride thing, oh, I depend on the Holy Spirit only. This is one of the biggest danger for those of you who are going to be preachers. Yeah. So you filter data to highlight points. Not every data is of equal value. You have to sort it out. You have to prioritize, and you have to place in order and say, this is it. So if Jesus is going to talk about faith, this is it. And so you can bring it up here. And then we have to see the different ideas. If you say, like Paul says, hope, faith, and love. So can this different idea converge? And then what is the big idea? So you keep tossing this thing in your mind because you start to analyze, you start to see all the different smaller parts. The synthesis is what happened is that after you have been working on it, a possible subject emerges. Now you begin to see a subject, and let's say, for example, this subject is about holiness, and then it starts to emerge, and then you double check the passage, and then you go back again, and then you see the details that you have you have taken them apart, and you see that, and then you see how they relate to one another. So that will give you a confirmed idea of what you would actually be able to preach. All right, what subject you're going to use, and how are you going to present your case? How are you going to present your sermon? I hope this makes sense to you. If it's too abstract, you can write to me, and then we will talk. All right. So does the subject fit all parts, or is it too broad? How do you narrow it? Because the exegetical process is for you to find the subject. Like, you cannot just come up with a subject that is very broad, just like you say, oh, love, and then, but then you have to narrow it down to what type of love. And then you want to talk about the agape, and maybe you want to talk about the eros and so on. So you have to bring it down. And so that sermon, you'll be maybe talking surely and purely on agape love, but in comparison to all the Greek ideas of other types of love. And so, but you cannot have a just too broad. Too broad, then you will be preaching forever. Okay? Or is it too narrow? Is the container too small? Is there a larger subject that may include all parts that need to be asked there? So is your subject true to the passage? So here again is that you ask yourself, too broad? Now you ask yourself, is it too tiny, too small, too limited? That you only preach on that one part. We will have actual exercises that you will run through. Okay. Then now we go to the big idea. Robinson said that a sermon should be a bullet. I think you read about it, not a buckshot. Ideally, each sermon is the explanation, interpretation, or application of a single dominant idea supported by other ideas, all drawn from one passage or several passages of scripture. So what you do is that a buckshot is that it has many of the pellets inside the buckshot, right? When you shoot, it's just scattered everywhere. So this kind of an approach is to whom it may concern. Means that you just shoot out like that. And sometimes you do find preachers doing that, and then at the end you don't know what he's trying to say, because this would apply to everybody. But I like to more zero in with one single bullet. So this morning I was zeroing in on sin, all right, on the temptation, and so I want to hit on that. Yeah. Now, what's the big idea? So this is the word called a proposition. So you need to locate the big idea within the text there and then. Then during that era, what was the writer's intention? The writers will always have a big idea too. A good writer will always have a proposition, will always have a big idea. So what was the writer trying to convey to his audience, and what was his big idea? You see, again, you go back to the cultural root, you go back to history, and which means that your understanding of history of that time and of that culture most important. Okay? And so determine the subject, what is the writer talking about? Determine the complement, what is the writer saying about this subject? So these two words are going to come to you very often, subject and complement. Subject and complement. So in English, I think we also use it like subject and predicate. So subject and complement. Now, a lot of people don't understand this is because their own English grammar has a problem. But when you build up your own English language and your own vocabulary and your own grammar, you know, understanding of grammar, then you start to grasp this idea is that there is a subject, and then over here the complement will describe the subject, and you will see here. All right. So this is like this. If I were to just say a simple sentence, the Bible is a gift. All right. The Bible is a gift. The subject is there. The complement is there. So a gift identify. It gives identity to the Bible. So what is the Bible? The Bible is a gift that somebody gave to me. All right. So there's a subject. So this one identify. It did not. It doesn't describe. But when you say the Bible is thick, it describes the Bible. You say the Bible is thick. So in understanding the sermon is the same thing. Is that when you start to talk about faith, then you must see whether your complement is identifying faith or describing faith. All right? So that when people need to understand what faith is, you may need to describe it. And then you will have some part whereby you identify this is called faith. Right? And then you may talk about, for example, you use an illustration. You say that this morning you come into to church and you just sit down, but you didn't check your chair, isn't it? Why? Because you have faith in your chair. You see? So you use this and then you bring it down to a level whereby people can understand it and say, okay, faith equals to trust. So slowly you start to build this image in the audience so that they will start to respond with knowledge, with understanding. Okay. So let's look at how we take the parable of the lost coin, and the subject here is how does God view sinners? So the subject is often stated as a question. So how do you start to write your sermon? When you read the parable, you are going to ask a question. So in this case is that this definitely is not talking about just a lost coin because it's a parable. And it's talking about how God is dealing with us. And therefore the question now, you are going to ask to create the subject. You say, how does God view me? Or how does God view the sinner? And the complement is this way. From the passage you find that this lady, you know, she was busy, she didn't busy herself with other things, but she focused on looking for her lost coin. And then when you study the historical culture, the lost coin was a part of the headdress that she, when she got married and she put on that headdress where it's made out of coins. And so there were so many coins, and then one of the coins was missing. So to her, it was not only precious, but it has a sentimental value. And therefore, she went out to search for it. So in your complement, when you read this, and then what do you say? You say God views sinners as very precious and will diligently pursue them so that they will return to him a return which he welcomes and celebrates. So why? Because at the end, when she found the coin, what did she do? She went out there and she told her neighbors and she said, I found the coin. She celebrated. So from that story, you start to have the feeling how God would treat us, you see. And so then what is the big idea? The big idea will be taking the question, the subject, and the complement and put them together again. So this is going to be your homework here, because what the passage that you have placed in the chat group, all right, that passage that you have chosen, you are going to find out. You're going to tell me, right? You're going to tell me what's the subject, what's the complement, and you're going to write out the big idea. So this is your sermon homework has already begun. All right. I ask you to remember. I ask you to read the passage again and then reach the context. The content is there, but you are supposed to read the context. And by reading the context, now you are going to get this. You're going to get a subject. Okay. Now, some of you are going to say, Pastor, I don't know how to do. Exactly. That is why you are here. If you know, then you don't have to be in this class. You see, some of you say, you know, like most of us Chinese students, especially, we don't know. We don't ask questions. Because we ask questions, malu, embarrassing. People think that we're stupid, that we're born stupid. I always ask questions. But when I was in Bible school, I was the one who asked the most questions. Until the professor said, Brother Albert, please don't ask any more questions. If not, I can't finish my class. Why? Because I wanted to know. I'd rather be stupid now, all right, so that I can learn. But all my Filipino classmates, are very quiet, as though they knew. Then after that, after class, they all flock around me and ask me a question. Because they didn't understand. But what is wrong with us is that we are still so proud and so puffed up. Oh, I'm so smart. Actually, bodo inside, but if you have a question, you ask. And some of us are not going to do this homework. You know why? Because we don't know. You see? So we don't have to do. Then we say, Pastor, I audit. Suddenly, when it comes to this, you say, I audit. Because if I do, then if I make a mistake, Pastor will think I'm stupid. No! I know you don't know. Right? If you know, I ask you to come and teach. But you have to go through this exercise. You make a mistake, I will make the adjustment. Right? And then, so from the subject, then you have the complement, and you combine these two, you come up with a big idea. So the big idea is that God views sinner as a precious entity, and so we diligently pursue them so that they will return to him a return which he welcomes and celebrates. Same, right? So get the big idea. All right. Okay. Now, when you look at Psalm 32, verse 1 and 2, the subject asks the question is that who did the psalmist say was a blessed person? Okay. And then complement in the same psalm in verse 1 and 2 say, the one whose sins are forgiven and whose spirit there is no deceit. So it's very easy. Now I just want to simplify it for you. Every time when you see a portion, you ask a question, you find the answer. That's it. Easy, isn't it? Then after that, you combine. So the psalmist says, a blessed person is one whose sins are forgiven and whose spirit there is no deceit. You see? So simple. I think even all your children know how to do. Right? So all of you big buffalo are so scared. Don't be sorry. It's so simple. Ask a question, then answer. The question that you ask is a subject. The answer is complement. And then the big idea is the combination of the two. Okay, enough? Easy, right? Very easy, huh? Okay. Why should we exalt God, right? Because he gave us every spiritual blessing in Christ. So Ephesians 1, verse 3 to 10. Then the big idea would be we should exalt God because he gave us every spiritual blessing in Christ. So once you got the big idea, then you start to break down, and then those will be the meat, the fodder that you give to feed the people, because every of these points here will be enriched and enhanced. So the big idea, now I have repeated this to you again. What's the big idea? The big idea is usually the restatement of the subject and the complement. Okay, I've said it many, many times now. Very easy, okay? Right, let's look at another example. No, these are just some of the examples that I offer you. You know, you can talk about the conversion of Paul when he was knocked down and then he went blind and all that. Then you can talk about rich young ruler, how he walked away sad. You can talk about the sin in the church in Matthew 18. You can talk about the Samaritan woman at the well, and then also the letter to the Laodicean church in Revelation. So these are some of the exercises that, if you like, you can do. Run through it in your head. Okay, now when you look down, we bounce big ideas off audience. So we assume that you have an audience, and sometimes your audience may just be your husband or your wife. All right, but you live by yourself, then the audience will have to be the Holy Spirit then. But it's okay. You can always make the phone call, and then I can be one of your audience. And then you ask yourself is that, how will your audience receive the big idea? So every time before I preach, I always in my mind, in my heart, I will be looking like at all of you who sit there every Sunday. And because you come from different backgrounds, I have to accommodate all of you. And I have to find out whether this big idea will mean anything to you. Now, especially when I preach about family, I preach about, you know, harmony in the family, and then some of the single people, they will say, oh, it's talking about husband and wife, it may not mean me. Then I have to throw in an idea. It says that one day you may have to counsel couple, one day you may have to give advice to your friends who are married, and that you don't have to fall down to know it's painful. Means that you don't have to go into a marriage to know that you know, the couple, they can have disagreement. You see, so wisdom is such that you don't have to fall down to know it's painful, so you can give advice, and then that will cause the single in the church to be interested to hear the sermon about the family. So sometimes you have to start like that, and to keep your audience. If not, when you announce something and say, "Oh, I'm going to talk about children," then those who have no kids, they will be switched off, and they will take out their handphone, pretend to read Bible by playing game. Choo, 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 right? So we have noticed some of this thing happening in our church. Okay. And knowing your audience will help you in evaluating what you should be preaching. This is a given, obvious. And then you exegete your audience now. Means that you must understand. Exegete is to understand where your audience are coming from. Is your sermon more concerned with the local or cultural needs of the audience? So, for example, when I was in America, and I was preaching in a mixed church with many friends who are Black Americans, right? I have to preach differently, and most of my illustrations from Singapore, they didn't understand, and therefore to prepare myself, I actually would go and listen to an American preacher, and then I would take his illustration. And then some of the things that he said, like some of the current event in America, some of the pop groups and all that, and all those I didn't understand, but they understood, and therefore I must be able to get down to their level so that they can understand. And then, is your sermon theologically coherent or not? So yes, you want to be culturally coherent, but then whether your theology makes sense or not. When I was in India, under one banyan tree, one huge, humongous banyan tree, there were 400 villagers who sat under that tree, and that was the day that we had our curry cooked right there. And I was preaching about the river of life. Why? Because we were next to a river, next to a river. And the response was quite good, was that because I didn't go very deep, but I just used the river and talking about the river, the out of your belly shall flow a river of living water. And so then get the people to move in the Holy Spirit. And so theologically it's working, practically it's working, and then spiritually it touched the heart of the people. So you have to continually evaluate. Now, when you make a mistake, it's fine. We all make mistakes. If one day we don't make mistake, we'll be in heaven already. So allow yourself to make mistake and don't be too hard on yourself. Nowadays, you find that sermons are recorded. And so you get to hear your mistake again and again and again. All right. Some of my mistake I heard in my sermon, but I won't tell you. Okay. Are you beating around the bush hoping to hit something? Now this is because you don't know the subject. If you don't know the subject, you start to beat around the bush. And therefore, my advice is that never preach something that you don't know. And even if, let's say, for example, you have been invited to preach, and this church wants you to preach about end time. I say, oh, sister, can you preach about end time? And then you are not adequate in that. You don't know a lot about end time. And therefore, you should say, no, I will not. I will not come and preach because that is not the topic that I know. Be honest, you see. That is not something that I'm well versed with. So like, for example, if they ask you to preach about healing, wow, you are very good at healing. You have been trained in faith line about healing. You know it like the back of your hands. Then you say, okay. And once you go in and you find that straight away your sermon will get result, means that miracle will happen, right? But you don't beat around the bush. Okay. As an apprentice of preaching, you need to allow your team to offer suggestion, opinion, viewpoints, and even power praises. You will have a group of people who are very close to you, and some of them will be from this class, or even I myself can become part of your team to evaluate the sermon that you want to preach. Oftentimes, you find that in the beginning when Pastor Charlie was preaching, that he had to come to my office, and then he had to preach in front of me, and then he had to, I had to run through with him. Same with Pastor Carlson, and at that time also Pastor Gilbert. But now when they become more, then I don't spend time doing that. But of course, I'm open if they were to ask me. So it would be good if you can get a team of fellow students, and then because they have the same background as you, and then they have the same textbook, and they attend the same class, they will be able to tell you and say, hey, didn't we learn about this, and you are doing this, and this may not be right. So, but you must be open to suggestion. If you are too proud, you fail. I always say this again and again and again, is that because we all Chinese are very proud, we don't want to show that we are stupid. So we don't want a team. We don't want anybody to discuss about our sermon. We just like a bull like that. We just charge into the China shop and then break everything. But it's better that you preach to us first. Okay, you let us run through it first. And then, yes, and it can be very irritating because you know what? They're going to tell you, this one is not good, and so on and so forth. Okay? And then you've got to have very thick skin also, because if not, you go home and cry. You'll go home and cry and say, I'm so hopeless. So run the sermon idea through. Then verbally process your sermon ideas with your team, which means that you start to preach portion. That time, actually, Pastor Charlie and Pastor Carlson and all the rest, they actually preached the whole sermon while I took notes. Right? Means that they haven't preached to the whole church yet. They preached to me so that then I will say, okay, now this thought is not, um, it's not a thorough thought, and it's not, you haven't thought through about this. And so they have to change and all that. It's very frustrating, especially when you already think that you have a very good thought, and then, but then somebody will come and tell you and say that, I don't think so. Of course, the person must know what he's saying, not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry who come and say, oh, I like this and I don't like this. So what you need to do is get people who are your peers or people who are your lecturer, and then to be able to guide you. So you will discover improved ways of saying things, better words and phrases. Like some of you, your grammar is a problem. Your past tense, present tense, all confused. Yeah. So normally in this case, I would say go and practice. Learn to practice and learn to recognize past tense, learn to recognize present tense. And oftentimes I also make mistake in that, because you're going to talk about Abraham in the past, right? Then suddenly you want to talk about Abraham Pang, Pastor Abraham Pang in the present. Then you confuse which Abraham you are talking that you talk about. And so when you are confused, then Abraham Pang, you talk about the past, as though he died already. And then the old Abraham you are talking as though he's your good friend. So these are things that can happen. All right, removing obstacles. Where are they now in this issue or idea? Means that your audience, I'm talking about your audience, that do they understand? If right now I'm talking about COVID-19, you can understand, right? Let's say, for example, if I'm going to talk about the plague, the Black Death, many of you don't understand, right? And you don't even know where this Black Death and so on. And some of the young kids, you know, that if we will talk about what H1N1, they may not even know. So you have to ask yourself, are they on the same page with you in this idea? And what obstacle do you need to remove before you can move your audience towards this biblical position? Excuse me for the one I turn on the current. All right. So ask yourself what obstacle. Now, what would be the obvious obstacle? The obstacle would be that there may be an obstruction caused by a particular language. Okay? Or maybe because you are so used to using Singlish, like me. Sometimes I will use Singlish when I preach. And then I realize that maybe the Malaysian may not understand Singlish. And so I run this through with my wife, and my wife said, I don't know what you are talking about. Then I said, okay, that's an obstacle. Therefore, I have to switch. And sometimes you find that we Singaporean, our Malay words are different from yours because we invent them. There's no such word. And I use that on my wife too, and she said, don't know what you are talking about. Then I say, okay, what do you say here? And then she will tell me. And so that is removing obstacle, because language a lot of time can become an obstacle. Like in America, because I was preaching in Singaporean slang, so I thought that I was preaching perfect English, you know, the Queen's English. No, it is Lee Kuan Yew English. And then some of the people did not understand me. And so I had to pretend to be like Pastor Eric, like that, slang a little bit, you know. I sound like American like that, and twist and change my voice too, but it didn't work well. All right, leverage from experience. Okay, this is something that all of us learn. I have mentors, all right? I have people who guide me, and my senior pastor was one of them. You know, she was a very good preacher, very good, and till this day, some of her words and some of her phrases I still use. Then, of course, I learned from other preachers, and thank God is that now I can learn from preachers on the internet. And so I start to adopt their experience, and then I would go to classes like this, Homiletics and all that, to learn from them and listen to their advice. So experience and advice from seasoned preachers, they are very important. They will help you discover which ideas resonate better with the audience and how best to present it. For example, if you listen to Dr. Ravi Zachariah, I suggest you don't use his English. His English is a little bit what we call chimotology, chincha chim. Until you do not know. When I was in my 30s, when I first met him, I love it. He talked so much, and half the time I didn't understand him. But I thought that he was so brilliant because I didn't understand him. People whom I did not understand must be very brilliant. And so I bought all his tape, all the cassette tape. And I remember I counted one tape I listened 27 times. And I knew the sermon by heart. I knew when he paused, I knew when he's going to use that word. And for every new word, I actually went to the dictionary to find out. Like for example, you know, simple word like friendly, you know. We say, oh, Pastor Phoebe is a very friendly sister, you know. She's a very friendly pastor. But then he will come out and say, Pastor Phoebe is gregarious. Wow, what is this word, man? What is gregarious, man? Don't know. That guy is to read, you know. And other big words like so when you listen to his sermon, right, don't think that you understand. Pause and then start to check. But for yourself, unless you are talking to professors, unless you're talking to people in Harvard or university or what, try not to use this, because I can assure you, if you use this, 99% of faith liner would not understand you, plus the pastor would not understand you. You are too cheap, okay? So don't try to impress. Make sure that the people can understand. All right, so now you are going to determine, because you are, first you actually would get the big idea from what you have explored, from the Bible. All right, so that's called the exegetical big idea. Okay. Oh, break time. Okay. Okay. Let me finish this slide. Okay. So this exegetical big idea must go into what we call hermeneutical big idea or homiletic big idea. All right. So there and then and here and now. So always remember that the exegetical big idea, can you hear me now? Just wait. Okay, oh, good. The exegetical big idea there and then cannot be used for now, here and now. This is always the mistake that some of the preachers, they will stay so far in history that nobody understands what is going on. And so they do not have take-home value. Remember, your take-home value will be the here and now. Therefore, a very good preacher is someone who is able to translate the principle, not just the story, but the principle of the whole idea and bring it down to the present level. All right? So this is, you got to determine the homiletic or the hermeneutical big idea. And then explanation. What does it mean in the Bible? Validation, is it true? And implication, what does it mean for the audience? So in your sermon, all this you have to put it there, because you do not assume people understand or they know. For example, you just preach a very simple verse like, for God so loved the world, John 3:16, and then you expect people to understand, but some people don't. And therefore you have got to explain the background, explain Nicodemus, explain born again. And then some of you are, I think Brother Alan asked about, asked about born with water and then born of the Spirit. What did Jesus mean by that? And then the validation is that whatever that you are now presenting, is it convincing enough that people know that it is true? And then how do I apply it? What should I take home? Okay. And then can it be applied by your audience? And the next thing here, most important thing, is that how does your message change the worldview of your audience? I want you to understand this, that transformation comes from worldview. If your worldview is still that of the world, then you find very hard to change, right? So why you find that when we preach sermon after sermon, and some people have been with us for the last 4 years, and no transformation. Why? Because there's no renewing of the mind. The Bible talks about renewing of the mind. So my whole purpose when I preach a sermon is to renew your mind. Like this morning when I shared this, and I'm going to ask you to deal with, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. These are the three things that I want you to deal with. And also because I know that these are the real life experiences that you are having. So transformation is only you and God, but the word that you share will help to change your worldview. So this is what a preacher must do. And then you choose your idea. You do have the right to determine which are the ideas that suit you better in your sermon. Remember, you have your team. Your team of people, they will help you. Maybe I'm part of the team, all right? And so I'm giving you ideas, but you don't feel like it. Like right now, I'm part of Pastor Grace's team, all right? And Pastor Grace is writing a paper. And I give recommendation, suggestion, and all that. And then she has the right to choose and say, oh, I don't like this. I'm not going this road. I'm not going this route here. And so on and so forth, right? And then you being the one who give ideas also shouldn't get upset because people don't use your idea, right? So when you are a part of the team of the other guy, then you have to be magnanimous too. Then when people are being a part of your team helping you, then you have to be very magnanimous in the sense that you do not become sensitive if somebody questions whether your idea is valid or whether this flow of idea is logical. You don't get upset. You don't. Right? So all this part of you, so in order to become better, you have to allow coaches to come into your life. Now, one thing about coaches are like this. You find that all the boxers, right? All the coaches, like I watched Muhammad Ali when I was young, and his coach was a white guy, very small size, and I say, well, this guy, his coach, how come? So it seems like, he didn't have to punch the coach, he just had to blow, and then the coach would have fainted. But that coach was able to catch, all the weak parts and be able to help him to enhance all the strong part and then make him a better boxer because the coach was able to tell him where he went wrong and where he did right. And so as coaches, I may not be able to preach as well as you, but I can tell you, hey, this part may not be good, that part may be good. Because some people say, oh, you have to be as good as me. Maybe younger time, maybe that coach was as good as him, but at this age now, of course not. All right, now we go to sermon purpose. And what is a sermon purpose? When you start to look at a target, the sermon begins with a target. Without the target, you shoot the arrow, and then you shoot the arrow anywhere, and then you go there and draw the target. That is not counted. All right? Your sermon purpose is your target. So secure moral action in a measurable way. So what do you want people to do? How do you want to respond? For example, let's say you preach against lying, and so you say that we must speak the truth. Then you find that you can put down as measurable, which means that let's say if this sermon were to be applicable to you, you have been lying, let's say, twice a week, you will tell some kind of a lies or you stretch your story. Then after you have heard this sermon, the Holy Spirit will use the word to convict you. And so maybe you only lies once a week. And then later on, once a month. And later on, once every 6 months. And then later on, you only lie once a year. And then never lie, that you are blatantly honest. So your sermon must get result. So the sermon get result two ways. One is that it hit me first. My sermon will hit me first. It will transform me first before it transforms you. And therefore, for people who preach a lot of sermon, that you find that we go through very tough times. Sometimes you will see Pastor Bruce will tell you, and suddenly I will close my eyes and raise two hands up, and then I will keep saying, I'm sorry, Lord, I'm sorry, Lord. Why? Because the Holy Spirit was speaking to me. And my wife will say, honey, is it all right? You're not having a heart attack. Why? No, because Holy Spirit. So if you write your sermon like this, you are doing well. Because why? You are listening to the Holy Spirit. But if you just write your sermon mechanically, because you have to preach a sermon and then just write like that, then you find that it has no impact. There's no life in it, right? The Holy Spirit is not involved. And so at the end of the sermon, how the audience should respond and what they should do. So oftentimes you find that in our church, we have altar call. Or like, for example, if Pastor Ashok were to preach and Pastor Charlie and other pastors, you see that I normally come up at the end to give the altar call. And of course, they all can learn how to do it. But the ability to catch what's for the people, it comes by experience. So immediately I catch on the sermon purpose. What was Pastor Ashok trying to say? And then when I take over, when he handed the mic to me, I would come in, and then you find that the crowd would respond. The people would respond to the call and come forward. And the response is not just for show. The response is to show that what has changed in the heart is being translated into action. And then they will come forward, and every step that they will take is called a step of faith. So this is very important. Not that you just like your altar to be filled with people, so impressive, look at me, That is not the case. You will grow up, and you will grow beyond that. And you don't need that. You don't need that to augment your ministry. Like I've seen some pastors still go around pushing people down, because they want people to be slain and all that. Because that gives them the great feeling. You see, there's such anointing in my ministry, and everybody fainted. Like I told you before, if you want to do that, just don't brush teeth for 5 days, and you will achieve the same result. Everybody will fall. Okay, so grow up. All right, I want you to look at this ABCD model of establishing the purpose, the target. All right. So A stands for audience, B stands for behavior, C stands for condition, and D stands for degree. Yeah? So who is the audience? What is their prior knowledge? Now, how do I know the audience? I know the audience not when I am standing on stage. I know you during lunchtime. I know you when I fellowship. And I talk to you, and through the communication that we have on WhatsApp, or email and all that, or phone call, then I start to know you. And then if, let's say, for example, here is one sister asking this question, here is another brother asking the same question, and then here is another asking the same question, then I know that this could be the kind of a question that I have to provide an answer. And so in my next sermon, you'll find that I would start to incorporate all this answer into the sermon. And you find that I used to do this previously when I was in my first church, where I planned for the whole year. But now I no longer plan for the whole year. I plan month by month. Why? Because now it's so dynamic. Like, for example, you see that this month, the theme, right? So it is that Christ is over my adversity. Why? Because we are going through all this COVID-19 stuff. And so Christ is over my adversity. And that theme, I actually had a different theme. But when COVID-19 came, I had to change. You see? So you be flexible. You know who your audience, and then behavior. What would be the desired change in the behavior of your audience? So like we say, right, you always have the end in mind, the target. And then next one is, what are the conditions under which the objective must be completed? What would be the condition that this sermon that you preach would come into effect? So what do we mean by condition? We have to look at different situations. For example, your condition is that your members will respond patiently, peacefully, gently in the midst of stress. Then that condition, then you have to wait for that condition to happen. And then one day, if let's say the wife come to you and say, Pastor, my husband changed, that day we had an accident and he was smiling and he was telling the guy who hit him, it's all right. Last time he used to punch up the guy, but now I'm different, Pastor. Then you know that in that adverse condition, your objective has been met. So always you find that the condition that you set will be opposite of what you want accomplished. Means that this condition will never enhance it, but it will aggravate it. But then because when the person put on Christ, then the person become patient, the person become kind, become gentle, become loving. Then you say, oh, okay, I reached that. So same with you, when you preach, you must put a condition and then you start to preach. Like now, it's lockdown. What did I say during the last few times? Always, I always say, husband and wife, be nice to each other. No need to, be magnanimous. If husband says something wrong, never mind, kiss him, something like that lah. Why? Because the condition is stress. So I have to say all this. Yeah. What is the degree or the standard that audience must meet to reach acceptable performance? So you must see at what level. For example, if let's say the level of the stress is to cause the person to want to tell lies, but the person never tell the full truth, but only half, then you know that that is not an acceptable standard. That you want it to be 100% truthful. So if the person has done wrong, he has to admit it, but he won't drag somebody in or he give an excuse like what Eve did. Eve said, or like what Adam did. He said that the woman that you give me, she was the one who caused me to sin. You see. So here you find that you want to have this acceptable performance. For example, when I want you to memorize the 10 Commandments, which means that you have to memorize all 10 and not 9.5. All right, it got to be 10. You see. Let's say if I say, okay, you only memorize 5, then you do 5. Like now, I have a standard for you that you are going to write the sermon, but I'm walking you through it. I'm walking you through it. And normally, you see what happens is that in a real Bible school, we have outside class time. Outside class time, which means that I actually sit down with the student one-on-one and tutor them on their sermon. They'll be writing and they'll be doing mind mapping and all that. Then I will guide them. But down here, we don't have it. And so I may have to get hold of you and or maybe through Zoom or through whatever ways to be able to guide you. But all this is for you to reach that particular standard. So as a preacher, same thing. You preach and that your audience must reach. For example, you want your members to, all of them, to grow spiritually by attending home cell. Like this is what Faith Line wants. And so Pastor Grace, she knew about this. And then she has been pushing. And then those of you who are cell leaders, you are doing the same thing. And then on Sunday, when I preach a sermon about togetherness, about cell, about growing and all that, I am trying to make sure that we achieve at least up to 90% of the people attending cell, which means that 90% will be the acceptable standard. Okay? So how do I know? In time, I will know whether those sermons that I preach about togetherness and unity and cell work, whether they will work or not. So this is same with you. All right. So the sermon purpose is taking the current mindset, you see that line in the center, taking the current mindset and go to your target mindset. So I think these are very standardized things. Number one is that worldliness is a part of the church now. That people carry worldliness into the church. It's no longer the church in the world, but the world is in the church. And that's why when we want to talk about revival and so on and so forth, which means that, actually very simple, means that the person let go of the worldly mindset. And so for the current mindset, I have to preach sermon to bring out the spirituality of the person. And then the sensualism, those carnal things that so attracted so many of our young adults. And some of our young adults are messing with this sensual stuff. Because you know what? Because of the fact that the world tell them that being sensual is good. And so the good and the bad, they're all mixed up. And so what we have to do is present the biblical self-control so that our young people won't be sleeping around, our young people won't be just dating any Tom, Dick, and Harry. Our young people will know that there need to be that spiritual power within them for self-control. And then self-centeredness is about selfishness. And so, so this is something that is happening in our church too. And so what we do is that the law of displacement is that self-centeredness cannot go away until you have the servanthood. When you become like Christ, you take on the servanthood. So you start to preach that. So if let's say you find that most of your people are very, very selfish and there need to be a transformation, you preach servanthood. You preach about the nature and the characteristic of Christ, the true servant leader. And then people who have, something wrong. The other way around, switch. The current mindset is fear, and then we have the target mindset is faith. Oh dear. Can you see that one? Switch, we switch. Okay. That is to check whether this one must be midnight 3 a.m. when I did this. All right. Then individualism and interdependence means that the West is telling us to be individualistic, but you find that our culture, our Eastern culture is always interdependent. And then the biblical culture is also interdependent. And then from self-will to submission, consumerism to contribution. So like right now we are here, we are locked down, but there are people who are out there. They are not having enough to eat, and they are not having clothes to wear and maybe place to stay. And so what we do is that we learn how to sacrifice, means we learn how to contribute. Though we have not really done it officially, but individually you find that some of you are already doing it, and the home cells are already doing it. So indirectly, I know that the word of God has been affecting you. Means that you didn't come to me to look for leadership. You do it by yourself. In fact, you come to me to suggest, can we do this? You see? The church did give some money to some of our people who are struggling, but of course we cannot announce, to whom we give. But the leadership will be, the pastors, they will be told about this. Yeah? All right. So let's look at the A, B, C, D. So the sermon objective, the target. After the sermon, the congregation, which is the audience, will be able to competently, which is the standard, the degree, all right, memorize, right? That's the behavior, the action, the 10 commandments by what? Using the association method, which means that I give them a condition, means that you have to use this method by associating with action. One God, no two God, and all that. So here you find that it is that through this sermon, if I'm going to preach about the commandments of the Lord, the law of the Lord, and then I want them to take home, then I include this part, this activity into it. So now I'm telling you, sermon is not just preaching with words, but you include activities. And then later on you will learn that you will include video and all kinds of social media. Uh, uh, You'll find that in our church we use a lot of slides. But for many years, I never used slides. I just preach with notes. There's no slides to use, right? But now we use PowerPoint and we use slides. Okay, let's talk about sermon style, which I've shared with you already before, but we are going to run through it. So sermon style is what we know as roadmap. You now know the meaning of the passage. Remember, you exegesis, you exegete the meaning, and then you have the hermeneutical meaning that you have, and then you also know the needs of your audience. Then what shape your sermon must take, which means that you are going to find the vehicle and you are going to find the roadmap. How are you going to accomplish your purpose? So here it comes to talk about your form, talk about your skill level. So here you got the essence. Now you got all the meaning now, but then how do you communicate the meaning? So here, this is what is happening. You exegete the text, and you give you on one side is content, right? The content, in the content, you are going to understand the word meaning, the different word, whether it is in in Greek or in Hebrew or in English. You want to understand those words. Then you have grammar and syntax. Some of you may not know what is syntax. Syntax is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. So here, for preacher, you really have to learn how to speak, really learn grammar. Now, if you are a Chinese preacher, then you learn some of the Chinese 成语 and some of the proverbs and so on, so that you can convey. And then on the other side, you have to see the context of the content. This is the content, but context, all the surrounding thing is that what is the genre? Literary genre means that is it a song, is it a drama, is it a narrative, is it an epistle? You know, you have to know it. And then you have to know the context, which is historical. So it's very simple. You just take this slide and then you put in front of you and you know what is called exegeting the text. Okay? And then the next one is you are going to take your text and you're going to run through what we call sketch noting. Means you write notes. Now, I normally in a meeting, you see I have a blank piece of paper and I will draw things like this. Because I'm an artist, so I will draw pictures, I will draw dinosaurs, I will draw all kinds of stuff, you know. So if the person in the meeting is very boring, then I draw some boring faces, you see. So, but the purpose for you is not to do that. You are going to connect the words and the images, all right, with arrows and other symbols so that you can understand. Then you link the relationship between the different parts of the passage. And we hope to have time to teach you how to do mind mapping. So this is a simple idea of mind mapping. In the past, we only use a piece of paper, and now you have the big idea. And from the big idea, you are going to go into the main points, okay? You're going to go into the main points, and then later on, you shall go into the subpoints. And so this is how you do mind mapping, 3 different ideas. And when I was in Bible school, when I was studying for examination, I used this. I used mind mapping. And by using this, I was able to repeat almost every point. Whatever the professor taught us, I was able to repeat. Now, at one time, a professor called me in, and he couldn't believe that I could repeat every word, means every main point, subpoint, and so on. And so he said, "Did you copy or you know?" And I said, "No, I can do it right here." you know. And so while he looked at me and I did it, and because of this mind mapping. And so imagine you have to preach a sermon for an hour or 45 minutes, and you have no notes. But with this mind mapping approach, you can remember. All right. This is another way you can find Jeremiah 29, 1 to 14, hope for the future. And then you go one side, you go into historical context, the exile. All right. And then you go to this pitfall current context. So here you find that on your right is the exegetical idea, and then on your left is the hermeneutical idea, the current context. And then you bring all these things. So suddenly the sermon is being formed, and you are getting idea, all right? And you are able to later on write the outline. So this is called mind mapping approach. But nowadays they have actually apps that help you to do mind mapping. Here again is you can use color. I saw one sister in the Bible school. She actually used a lot of color pencil, and she always topped the class, you know. And this is how she would do it. Something like this, where the red has a different path, and then the blue has a different path, and the green and so on. And so this is how you do it, the mind mapping approach. And these are the software that you can have, all right? FreeMind is an open source. iMindMap, I think this one you have to buy. XMind, MindJet. But you can go to FreeMind and then you can try. And it's very easy. You put one point in and then you put another point, automatically there's a line that will join, okay? And then web-based mind mapping, Google it, and all that. So you can, I will give you all these slides and you can go and see. And I have tried Google Koggle it, and it's not too bad. It's quite easy to do. All right, so let's go back to the roadmap here. How do you accomplish your purpose? Because now you are going to create a sermon, you are going to have an audience that you are going to reach. Yeah. So, like we say here, you have your meaning of your passage, the needs of your audience. So, what is the best way to get your message to the destination? Now, the three questions that you always ask, and I think this is found in your textbook. What does it mean? What does it mean? Explain it. Means that you get into the mind of your audience too. Is that when you are preaching, they are going to say, okay, what is he talking about? What does it mean? Then you find that you explain it. Sometimes in the sermon, I will ask a question and then I will provide the answer, which means that I take the place of the audience and then I anticipate your question. So when I'm preparing the sermon, I'm playing dual role here. I'm the speaker and I'm also the audience. And so that is the best way. You cannot just go and pour out what you want to pour out. You must find out whether they want it or not. So you say, what does it mean? Then it is really true, prove it. Means, is it valid? Prove it. Then therefore you have to have proof. For example, when I preach about the Red Sea, and then I began to show some evidence that the location of the Red Sea, that the traditional location may not be accurate. And then based on the archaeological finding, we find a new place for the Red Sea. It's not a new place, it could be the exact place because they dug up various of these items. Excuse me, somebody's calling me. Okay. And then what difference does it make? Then you apply it. Okay. So application. So these are the three questions when you are creating your roadmap. All right. In roadmap, we start to talk about inductive arrangement. What is inductive arrangement? This one you learned already, inductive, deductive. So inductive arrangement is that you do not present first the big idea. So no big idea first. when you start to say introduction, when you preach, you introduce your sermon, you only introduce to the first point. What's the first point you want to put across? That's it, right? And then from your first point to the second point, you always have bridges. We call it transitional sentence. Always have bridges. So make sure that your last sentence always make sure it links to a new point. And then as you go along, this inductive arrangement is this way. You present, let's say, an arm, and then you present a leg, then you present a head, and then you are showing the picture of a person. All right? So the conclusion will be the big picture. But the conclusion is not a conclusion just to share the big picture, but the big picture will have application. means you want what the audience should do. So this called inductive, means slowly unveiling. This is a very exciting way of preaching if you know how. Means that you are able to lead the people and is full of suspense. The people are discovering. And especially when you have some of the meaning in the Greek and Hebrew, and then they have not been brought forth. And then when you start to bring forth, people say, ah, I see. Every time when they say, ah, I see, you hit home. Okay? And so people are interested because of being able to see new things or fresh things or see things from another angle. Now, deductive arrangement is different. Means that you present the big idea first. You are going to say, I'm going to tell you about this one idea. Means I'm going to tell you about this man. This is a person. And this person consists of the head, the hand, the body, and the leg. So that is deductive. Means you show the whole person, then you break it down and say, so the body of the sermon is to explain, to describe, to clarify, to prove, to verify, to confirm. Okay? Then the conclusion come back to the big idea is to present again and say, why do you need this big idea? So if my big idea is about sin kills, all right, or sin destroy your future, then I will bring all the parts of this sin here, I will explain, describe, and then verify and confirm, and finally tell you that if you keep sinning, your end result will be hell. And then the conclusion, I will ask you, I will give an altar call. Yeah. So you can see, here is what we call a hybrid here. And oftentimes I would use this too. But because I've been doing this thing for so long now, it has become like in the subconscious. So I don't really think like, I'm doing induction, deduction. But for you who are starting out, you need to know. Like you start with induction, and then you start with the first point, and you tell one story, then you tell the next story. Make sure that the bridges are formed. And then you come to, by the second point, you already have the big picture. All right? Then you go into deduction. Means that from the big picture, you are going to break down into smaller pointers to explain the big picture, and then finally you come to a conclusion. Then your conclusion means that the people need to make a decision. So this is called a hybrid. And so with hybrid, you are very flexible, which means that you don't have to say, I'm doing induction or deduction. If you get a bit confused, it's still okay. Then if you have induction, deduction, induction, deduction all mixed together, then you say this is a super hybrid. And you can still get through it. But most important thing is that the people must be able to have a good response. All right, now I come to the outline. Okay, how do you do an outline? This is going to take a while. What's the time now? Wow, we have only less than 15 minutes. What is outline? Outline is the skeleton. Outline is the format. So outline help you to see your sermon as a connected whole, instead of just separate pieces of idea. So this outline very important, and this outline I may need to spend time with you all individually, or I hope that some of you can just learn straight from here. Okay? So your sermon is arranged in an orderly manner that makes your preaching easier. Of course, you always have introduction, the body, and conclusion, right? But how do you put all this? Because if you do not know, then sometimes you might even put your conclusion into your introduction. So I'm going to share with you how you do this. Now, the human mind instinctively demands order, and your outline will be helpful for your audience to follow the flow of your thought. Sometimes in the process, I will repeat the point again. I will say, previously, this is one point. I've been talking about the lust of the flesh. And so now I'm talking about the lust of the eye. So I remind the audience that I was just finishing off with the lust of the flesh, and then now I'm going to teach you how to overcome the lust of the eye. And then later on, I'm going to talk about the pride of life. So they need to know that there is an order, but I cannot mix them all up. I'm talking about lust of the flesh, and I throw in the pride of life, then people all get jumbled up and they cannot follow. Therefore, you must hold steady and limit all the ideas that you have, limit to that one, the topic that you want to say. So your outline also help you to remember key points and also allow you to make adjustment if necessary. Let me tell you what adjustment you're going to make. Oftentimes, I find that I preach the same sermon with a different church, and you will find that sometimes the illustration, sometimes the pointers may be different. Or some of the detail, the Holy Spirit will come in and bring into remembrance certain things, and I must say, right? So here, but you still have to have the skeleton, you still have to have the outline and all the key points. But all the detail, the flesh that the Holy Spirit gives to you will be added on. And also, for example, you preach this sermon before COVID-19. Now in COVID-19, you are preaching the same thing. You find that it will be different because with new experiences, new encounters, your audience have a different encounter now, and then they are all locked in. Then what are you going to do? Then you find that the Lord will give you wisdom to make the adjustment. And so, always put it very simply. Put this in your mind. A sermon will have three parts: introduction, body, conclusion. Now, how do you figure out what is introduction? You think of an aeroplane flying, all right? The aeroplane taking off, right? So that's introduction. And then the body means that there'll be more, there will be 3 points in the body, and then you find it's like the plane cruising, the plane is flying, so it takes a longer time. So body is the one that will take a long time. And then conclusion is when the plane lands, you see. And I'm going to tell you, introduction and conclusion always come last. You never start off by writing introduction or conclusion. You always start off by writing the body. Because when you exegete, it will give you the idea, the big idea first, before you put introduction and you put conclusion. Most preachers got stuck. Why? They try to start off with introduction. Cannot do. No can do. You trust me. You won't go anywhere. You'll be stuck for days. So, but even though the introduction will be, we put here, we say write last, but preach first. So you don't preach your introduction last, right? So if it's an induction sermon, you introduce the audience to the first main point. Because you already have the main points and the next points and so on, but then because it's an inductive sermon, then you just introduce to the main point and you do not introduce to the big picture, all right, the big idea. You don't, just the first main point. If it's deductive sermon, your introduction must be to the big idea or the proposition. So I think that you know. Okay, let's talk about the introduction that you have to write at the end. Yeah. Sometimes in the introduction is after you got the whole picture, you already have the body and you have the 3 parts here. What you do here is that because you are now going out there to preach. Now, if you are a guest preacher, you always try to begin with an icebreaker to connect with the people. And the sermon if the sermon is meant to inspire, you can always begin with a humorous story or a story with an unexpected twist at the end. Some stories, they may not be very humorous, but then there is a twist. For example, if you go to Dr. Robinson's sermon, right? He had one sermon where he preached some, I think, maybe 30 years ago, and it's on YouTube. And he started by saying that because he was the guest, and so he said that if you are coming to my hometown, you are welcome. You know, you're welcome to call me. Okay, you're welcome to call me. If you need food, you need a place to stay. So all of us, our mind will be thinking, oh, all right. So if we need a place to stay, we can go and stay with him. Then he said, and I will show you where the hotel is, and I'll show you where the restaurant is. So, so that became a joke, and people laugh because all the time we say, oh, if you come to my hometown, if you need a place to stay, come to my house and stay. No, but he switched it and he twisted it. So this is unexpected twist. So he is very good at that. So if you have a chance to go and listen to his sermon, he is very good. His enunciation, diction, all wonderful. And this is for icebreaker, is for the purpose of connecting with the audience. The audience will like you in 2 minutes. I mean, in 2 seconds, not in 2 minutes. So when you go up there, you should be smiling. And you shouldn't be frowning, and you shouldn't be fumbling with your Bible. You shouldn't be fumbling with your, your slides or your laptop or your iPad or what. I've seen some pastor, they were frowning, and then they're trying to do some of their, this housekeeping right there. And then they arrange their watch over here, they arrange the Bible over here, at the pulpit, and then they're frowning all the time. And then they look up, then they smile and say good morning. But already that frown tells you that there's another side of you. And therefore, all of you who are preaching, learn to smile, but don't smile like a clown, Learn to smile with dignity, all right? Okay. Now, if you are the resident pastor like I am, if you are the pastor of a church, then you have no need for icebreaker. Why? Everybody knows you. But nowadays, some of the resident pastors, they started off with a joke, which is fine. There's nothing wrong that you start with a joke. You cause everybody to relax. And sometimes it's this way. If let's say you sense that the spirit is very intense, and then you can say, hey, relax, So in a way, you help the people to relax. So your introduction may be words of greeting, appreciation, acknowledgement. So here again, you see, like for example, if let's say you have just returned from, like me, I've just returned, let's say, from Singapore, and I've met a pastor who used to come to preach in our church, and then I will say, oh, I met Pastor so-and-so, and he sent you greeting. Or if one of you have done a great thing, and then I can express a word of appreciation or acknowledgement of certain renovation have been done in our church, or certain program that have been changed, or the food is now better, and so on and so forth. So all these are part of the way to connect with the people, to show that you are human. Don't pretend that you are an angel, you are not. And don't pretend that you are one of those holy saying, and then you are so detached. Please try not. Try to connect. Don't draw that line too strong. Some of us is like, oh, I'm the pastor, you are the member, stay away, And I eat at my own table, and you cannot join. This is nonsense. Try to relate. No need to put on that kind of a color. And then when you start off with introduction, remember, don't jump into the deep end. Do not go straight into, this Greek word and Hebrew word and this etymology and go, what? Because maybe you have a need to show how educated you are. You might have a need to show, I'm a very a scholarly pastor, I'm a theologian and all that. Then it shows that you are a little bit immature. When people go out there try to impress me with their knowledge and information and throw a few French word, and 2 or 3 Greek word and Hebrew word. Like one time, there's a pastor who came to our church and he said he said this word, and it turned out he said the Greek and all that. But I knew it wasn't Greek; it's Latin. But I kept quiet because he was my guest preacher. But he was trying to show off. Now, you want to show off, also you got to go and do your background check, and you realize that it's Latin, is not Greek. And then no exposition of any concept yet. Means that don't go into something terminology. Don't jump into the deep end. And don't start off with controversial issue, that immediately you cause the group to be divided into different segments. I agree with pastor, I don't agree with pastor. And then throughout the whole sermon, you have enmity. You have people struggling to accept you, and you have people on this side, they will be shouting, amen, amen, and on the other side, I hate you. Don't go into that kind of an issue yet. Okay. Start gentle but firm. And this is what I have learned. Like, for example, when I go out to preach, let's say I'm preaching about entering the promised land. So I started off by, I'm going to bring you back to the time of Moses. So now I start softly, right? Gently. And I say, I'm going to bring you back. So I'm taking them back to that time. And so I'm painting word pictures. Now remember, whatever you do, paint word picture. Don't be abstract. Like, for example, when you say that Moses went to see the Pharaoh, then you might want to change and say, Moses and his brother Aaron, they walk to the palace. So then the action verb is walk. So people see walking. And then throughout the whole thing, you have to be gentle like a dove, and then be as wise as a serpent. I'm going to ask you for a few more minutes so that I can finish this part here. I know it's 10 o'clock now. Yeah. So use the velvet glove approach. Means very firm, but very gentle. Now, how do you do that? Confidence. You must have absolute confidence in your message, absolute confidence in the way you will deliver it. And of course, that comes by experience. I remember at one time, I was asked to preach in Penang. That was my first outside assignment. My pastor had to rush back to USA. Her mother was very sick, and so she ran off. And then she had this appointment whereby she was about to speak at this anniversary of this church in Penang. And so she told the pastor, say, I have this assistant pastor, would you like him to preach? And the pastor said, yes, send him along. So I went. But I used a sermon that I had preached before in my youth group because I was the youth pastor. Before I became the assistant pastor, I was a youth. So I preached among the youth, and I used that, and that was the grasshopper complex, that sermon. And that sermon, I have learned it from another preacher, old time. And so I took a lot of information from him, and then I studied on my own, and I developed my own. And so that became my keynote sermon. So always know one thing is that when you are not sure, use the best sermon that you have. Don't be too proud and say, oh, I'm going to give you a fresh new sermon. Because you only have one time. All right, when you go to a new church, you only have one time for the people to want you back. And so, and then if you really want to preach the word of God, and you really got a lot of things that you want to teach them and share with them, then you make sure that your first sermon would be your very best. So my key thing is that you must have confidence. If no confidence, don't touch it. All right, and then you are able. Make sure that that sermon always have a good conclusion, so that they have a take-home value. So at the end of the sermon, people, their faith have been encouraged, and they want to pursue after the dream of God in their life. Okay. In pre-introduction, when you are a guest here, always make sure that before you actually go into your text and your word, All right, you have words of thanks for invitation to speak. Some of the people, you are like impervious to the fact that you need to be polite. You need to have manners. So when people invite you to preach in your church, it's a privilege. Yeah, you might be a very famous preacher, and then you are big time, and you got a very big church, and his church is only like 50 people, and your church is like 5,000. But you still thank, you still say thank you. And then one more thing also is that never ask people how many members do you have. You see, because I have some preachers will not preach in any church that is less than 500 members. Means that the audience must be 500. Anything below 499, he will preach. That shows a particular pride there, he said, oh, I want to maximize all that. Sometimes the Lord will bring us to a small church. Why? Because that is when the church need the most. And then if the Lord send you to that church, then you just go. Even if it's 10 people, you go. We have trained churches that have 10 people, and they ask me, Pastor, how many people you need to have before you come and train us on healing? I said, one. If only the pastor want to learn, I will go. All right? And of course, there are more than one. Yeah. So words of greeting on behalf of your church. Remember, you have a root. Remember, you have a church. Don't you go there and you are self-styled hero, you got no background, no church, you are like Melchizedek, no background one, you are so special. But you have a church. Every evangelist, every prophet, every preacher must have a home church. At one time, Pastor Abel Thomas, a very famous evangelist from our country, he treated our home church, as his home church, right? Then his children grew up in our church, and his wife. And so while he was out there preaching, he would say, I bring you greetings from my home church. And then make sure that you don't have any silly talks and no off-color jokes. I have listened to pastor from the pulpit telling off-color jokes, which means that it has two meanings. It tells you this, but here has a sexual meaning, and everybody knows it. And they laugh, but they laugh. What happened is that you allow carnality to come into the crowd. The audience now start to receive vibes that are carnal. So be very careful. Those of you who want to be preachers, all your dirty jokes that you learned when you are young, you throw them away and bury them. You no more use them. And you cannot even transform them or change them or conform them or whatever. You can't do anything. You just don't use them. All right? Then in the actual introduction, you think through, and for those of you who are starting out, you write down the sub-pointers in your introduction. Now, these are not the sub-pointers of your sermon. This is in your introduction. Because sometimes in your introduction, you may want to explain a bit more, especially when you take a passage that few people can understand. Or you have something here that maybe that culture may not be able to understand. For example, when you want to start to talk about the Passover lamb, maybe certain culture may not understand. I heard that in one island in the Pacific Ocean, this island, the people never understood what lamb is all about. What lamb, so when the preacher came and the missionary came and said, behold the Lamb of God, they didn't understand what's lamb. Behold the Lamb of God. So the preacher thought that maybe he should contextualize. And then since they raised pig there, so he said, behold the pig of God. And they didn't do well, because pig, they do not behave like lamb. All right? So finally, the denomination imported lamb, imported sheep, to show the islanders what lamb is all about. Okay, so in your introduction also, you must know whether they understand. So the transition sentence should lead the audience naturally into your big area or big idea, and also to your first point. So next week when we come back, we will be talking about a little bit about transition sentences. How do you build bridges? All right. So I end my class here. Thank you very much for your patience.